all of our journey is worth it. None of it is a waste. None of our
right.
experience was unneeded.
That's right.
It's all important. It all matters, even when we can't see the reason why. And that's a
Yeah.
really hard thing to remember when you're right in smack dab in the middle of all the hardness of it.
Sometimes it seems like it's going to be a long time before you understand
The
it.
miracles
Yeah.
fuel us.
We have to reframe our
We
expectations.
need to give
Yeah.
ourselves so much more grace.
The only thing I have control over in this moment is myself. So
Yep.
I'm the one that has to change.
Being
And
brave and showing up,
yeah.
like that is absolutely an example that we can be to everyone in our lives to help them know that it's possible.
While you were failing, the rest of us were all just still sleeping. Like we weren't even
Show up
trying.
messy. Like there is so much
Show up messy.
beautiful amazingness in showing up messy. Show up as you are, show up messy. And aren't you so glad that you followed through and did
When
it?
you don't give yourself time to have any second thoughts about it. It's just like, okay, done.
I'm
Go.
here. I'm in this. There's no quitsies. This
There's
is
no
it.
quitsies.
I
This
had
is
this
it.
vision of doing this, and I'm here
Yeah.
for it. No matter what. You
What?
show up and you do the thing you intended to do. No matter what happens, you just do it.
Get ready to love everything I am. All I want to be and understand. 'Cause I won't dim my light for no one.
They told me I had to pick one thing. No. Diamonds are multifaceted, and so are we. It's about time we let all the parts of us shine. How can we climb out of the box and fully embrace our own authenticity? I'm Kara Lee, and it's time for the Multi-Passionate Mama podcast, where clarity and creativity go hand in hand. Welcome back to the Multi-Passionate Mama podcast. I'm so happy that you're here, and we have such an amazing episode for you today. I'm really excited to share it with you. My friend Andrea Trenholm is here, and she just has such a beautiful story of brave motherhood is what I'm calling it. She tells her story of just like real life. And I feel like this is something that we're all going to be able to relate to on such a deep, deep level as we figure out how to be our best selves through every stage of life that we are living. And there's so many different ways that shows up. So Andrea is a researcher, an instructor, a writer, an athlete, and she's a mom to two amazing kids. She studied how schooling impacts wellness for First Nation students, and she received her PhD after many, many years of intensive study. She struggled with infertility before miraculously conceiving her first child, and then she navigated the COVID pandemic as a professor, teaching from home with two toddlers. She's learned the value of meditation and finding time to do what she loves, because motherhood, although beautiful, is frequently a growth opportunity. I love this conversation because there's just so much that we can learn from her as we can relate to all the different stages of motherhood and learning how to find ourselves again and through every stage, because there's ways in which that we find ourselves and lose ourselves in our work and in exercising and in motherhood and in infertility. There's just so many ways that we have to keep coming back home to ourselves. I feel like that's kind of the lesson here, is like coming back home to ourselves again and again and again. And so I just love her journey of brave motherhood. So welcome, Andrea, and thanks for being here. Thanks for coming. I'm so excited to dive into your story and to hear all about the things that light you up and how you're able to live your best life as a busy mom.
Yeah, okay. A little bit of background about me. So I had my kids a bit later in life. Like my daughter's 8 now, and my son is 6, and I'm 46, about to be 47. I spent a lot of time in school. My husband likes to say I went to like grade 35 because I I did an undergrad degree, I did a master's degree, and then I did a PhD. And the last one was with the Faculty of Education, and I'm in Fredericton, New Brunswick in Canada. So it was at the University of New Brunswick. And I just had this, my burning curiosity was around how schools as institutions like impact the wellness of individuals.
That's amazing. See, I also like spent forever in school. I was in
Did
college for
you?
12 years, but mine's
Yeah.
way less impressive because I just have a double bachelor's degree because I had my kids before that. So I did
No,
it all.
that, you know what? I've like taught so many like people that were doing it as moms with little kids or as single moms with little kids.
Like
And like
crazy.
hats off to you because I mean the fortitude it takes to do that, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah,
Me,
mine are all special needs. So it was a
uh
whole extra
yeah,
ball game and a
well,
half.
yeah, that's many more layers, right? That
It's so fun.
average people just don't understand at all. So for me, I ended up having 2 leaves of absences during my doctorate degree because while I was doing that, I got married. I was with my husband the whole time. It took me 10 years to do my PhD. So to me, it doesn't really feel that impressive. It wasn't like someone going through and doing it in 4 years. Um,
I get that. It's
it,
still impressive though.
it was like circuitous for a few different reasons. I kind of went down the rabbit hole of seeing what school was like for Indigenous people.
Cool.
And remember actually someone saying to me once saying, why did you choose to do a PhD in something you have no knowledge in?
Oh,
And it was kind of a slap in the face, but it was also a really honest question because it doesn't usually happen that way. But it's just like once I started to dig into it, someone had said, why don't you look at how schools impact wellness for First Nation students?
it's a fascinating topic to be sure though. Like it really is.
Yeah, and I was non-Indigenous. So at the beginning, it's like your naivety takes over and you think, well, I can do this and I can do it well. And then you realize what it's really going to take to do it well. So it
Yeah.
was a long journey. And I had 3 leaves of absences during it. Like I lost my dad.
Mm,
He died of cancer. He was only 61. And that like
wow.
I took some time off and it was the same year I was getting married in. So it was like big, big highs and big, big lows. And I was just so physically drained following
Yeah.
that. So I had a leave of absence then. And then a little while after that, my husband and I started thinking like, I was kind of naively thinking, I only have like, I can finish this degree in like about 1 more year. I'd been in it for about, I don't know, 5 years or something at that point. I'm like, I can do it. So we're like, well, let's start to try to have a baby. And I had all kinds of fertility problems.
Oh, which is
Yeah, I
so
had
painful and
like primary infertility, what was it called? Like diminished ovarian reserve. So my hormones were
wow.
looking like someone already in their early 40s and I was 36. And so then my priorities drastically shifted because when you stay in academia for a long time, it's like you sacrifice a lot of things. Like you sacrifice having a bigger fancy house because I was making hardly any money. Like even though I was teaching some courses, I was not really earning much. My husband has a good job, thank goodness. So we have a nice house, but not like, not all the material things that lots of people do have by their mid-30s. We didn't have lavish vacations and that was all okay with me. And he was fine with it too. Like we're like that, maybe that comes later, but I felt like I was doing purpose work, right? So, but then when I thought I'm sacrificing my ability to have children,
Mm.
that was a whole different thing.
Yeah,
Like
that'll change your whole
I
perspective.
got really mad. Like, all the emotions come up and I was like, what am I doing? Like I'm spending my whole 30s like in doing this last degree and anyway, so yeah, it really changed. It shifted priorities and we were lucky. Like we went through, all the testing, all the poking and prodding for like a year. And then we had to go through, I had to have surgery for a cyst in one ovary, which I almost lost that whole ovary, but thankfully they were able to save that one, which turned out to be the only ovary that responded to IVF when we finally went through
Wow.
that. Yeah, so once they pump you full of all those hormones and hope to get like 20
Yeah.
eggs, I had
Uh-huh.
two. I had 2 eggs and they
Wow.
came out of the ovary that almost lost, like that they almost had to remove during that surgery a year prior. So, and I have my daughter, like it worked first time, first round, and she's 8 now. So it just like changed everything for me. And then my son was a spontaneous pregnancy, came along like not
Mm.
long after. So they're only 20 months apart. Anyways, that's my like long backstory of how I like got to be a mom, I guess, and just like choices that I had to make along the way, because I remember especially during that really hard time where it looked like maybe we weren't going to have kids and we had to really think about what our life would look like. And at first you really don't want to do that because I had this image in my head of I always wanted to be a mom, even though I was putting it off and putting it off and putting it off to try to get the degrees finished first, right? Um, and I remember like every day, like I was sinking into like this depression and being so upset and so mad at the universe. And one day I got up and I was going up to the university. And we live on the north side of this river. We live at this, the city of Fredericton has this gorgeous, huge river going through it. Her real name, I'll call her her. Her
Yeah.
real name is Wolustoq, which means the beautiful and bountiful river
Oh, that's gorgeous.
of the Wolastoqiyik people here, whose territory it is. But on the maps, it's still called the St. John River, the way it was renamed by first the
Yeah.
French was like Rive Saint Jean, then the
Which is
British
so
called it St. John
interesting
River.
to see how
Yeah,
that integrates to your degree field and
yeah.
the history of the land, like, and how amazing that is and rich and deep.
Thank you for just, acknowledging that and being interested in it. So I had just driven across the bridge across this river and feeling like this weight and heaviness. And I literally saw a man walking down the street who had dwarfism, and he also had no arms. And he was walking downtown at like 9 in the morning, fully dressed, and something just hit me of like, and he had this huge radiant smile on his face while he was walking. And something just like hit me of like what it would take for him to even get up and get dressed in the morning. Like if he could even do that by himself, and probably not, right? Probably would have had people around helping him out. But here he was up and he was dressed and he was walking through downtown. And sorry, that story still gives me goosebumps because something in me in that moment said, like, I'm no longer going to look at myself as broken anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Like how much gratitude we get to have for our
Yeah.
lives and for our own trials, and how seeing them in perspective will change everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always think of that as like a turning moment, like that decision, because it doesn't mean that there hasn't been a few more times since then that sometimes you start to get those feelings of like brokenness or like, like, because things happen. We go through crazy, terrible things in life sometimes, and we all
Yeah.
experience traumas along the way. But there was something in that moment was like, nope, I'm not going to look at myself as broken any longer. And then I sort of surrendered to this, like, all right, well, we might have a life without children. And if that's the life I have, I'm going to make the most of it. And
Mm.
I believe in my core that there was something in that surrender
Oh, yeah.
that is why I have my daughter now,
Yep.
like why, and I have that I have two kids because I mean, I had know many other people that like went through many, many rounds of IVF and maybe didn't end up having any children, or they went through many in order to have one, and it's really painful and emotional process because as emotional as it is when you just think about it, it's even more so when you get pumped full of all those hormones.
Oh, yeah. There is
Right.
so much power in surrender. It is incredible to watch how that plays out in actual life because I've
Yeah.
experienced it myself, where you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm turning all of my insistence over to a higher power because I just don't have the control I wish I did.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a better plan here than I know about. And I see that
Yeah.
in your story too, of just like, if this is the life that I'm meant to have, then so be it. And then, yep, as soon as you stop trying to demand your way, that's when
Yeah.
the miracles start happening.
Not long after that, because honestly, like when we went through that process and then we, af going through, especially when it comes down to like the week prior to the egg retrieval, when they really like pump you full of hormones by injection, and we were going in almost every morning. Um, and you're just getting kind of like your one job is to try to be stress free.
But they pump you full of stress hormones.
And you're
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, I'm trying to do all the things. And at that time I didn't actually know, like I didn't really practice that much meditation and breath work. I was doing a lot of praying, but like yeah, I didn't have all of the tools that I have now. And you're like, at some point you want to just be like, stop telling me not to stress because you're making me more stressed, right?
Right? It feels like another demand.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time like walking the beach and like places that were really beautiful and serene. But the the day before we were supposed to go for the egg retrieval because they were monitoring so closely, a nurse from the clinic had actually called and said, um, because there's only two eggs, I think you should get some of your money back and not go through with this and go through another round. In my 30 years of doing this, no one's ever been successful with
Oh
having
my
seen where
God.
you're at. And I was just
So don't
devastated.
stress. Don't
Yeah, but don't
stress.
stress. And my husband wasn't there right at that moment. Thank God I had a close friend with me at the beach this day because then I just lost it. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And when he came back and I told him, and I was like, they're telling me like this nurse's professional opinion is that we shouldn't go through with
So
it.
you should
Because
give up. And you're like,
yeah, basically that we should
what?
do. But I was like, I honestly, in that moment, I was like, I don't know if I can go through this again. And he's like, so we do it. And even then we can still make a decision to do it again. And of course it's money, but it's he's like, so what about the money? Like we plan to do this. Let's just do it. Let's give it
You've
a
already
hundred
come this
percent
far.
all in. And so the fact that there was two eggs, but they both fertilized well, and
Ah,
we've got her. It's like,
to
yeah.
well, and to scrap
Anyways.
all that pain and all of that, the whole journey at that point. Like
Oh,
one thing, it's like all of our journey is worth it. None of it is a waste.
that's
None of our
right.
experience was unneeded.
That's
It's
right.
all important. It all matters, even when we can't see the reason why. And that's a
Yeah.
really hard thing to remember when you're right in smack dab in the middle of all the hardness of it.
Of all the
When it feels
hardness.
like, why is this thing happening to me right now? It doesn't make any
That's right.
sense. It just feels like I'm being picked on. But
I
it's all
know.
there for our growth. It's all there for us to become better humans over time. And hopefully, eventually we have to just trust that eventually, like, we'll have a greater understanding
A
of
greater,
our
yes, a more
path and why
clarity.
why all the
Yeah,
pieces were needed.
that's right. From like the helicopter view or the view from old age looking back. Sometimes it seems like it's going to be a long time before you understand. But it's funny that you say that it like that because I don't think I even really intended to have this whole conversation about my fertility journey and how I got my kids today. Because I was thinking more about another story. But the thing is it's like that story stays with me in those hard moments with them. Like, and there's,
Yeah, the
you know,
miracles. The
like,
miracles
yeah,
fuel us through everything. And if you can remember the miracles you've already been through, then it helps you to remember that there are more ahead.
that's right. That's right. And it's like, oh, and it's so beautiful when you think phrase it like that about remembering the miracle in it. But and some days I just say, well, even if I picture 12 hours from now, at least this will be a funny story to tell later,
Right?
right?
How many times like that I'm like the only good thing I can see in this situation is that it's gonna make a good story.
Yeah.
And then you
Sometimes
know
that's
what?
the best you can get.
Go
And at
have
least if
fun.
it can make yourself laugh in it,
Right. Like go
then
have
it's all right.
fun telling that story because you deserve it.
Yeah. So I guess that brings me to like so I have my two kids and finally finished been my big
Yeah.
dissertation and defended, and my son was like 13 months old.
Well, and I'm
And
hoping that you found a lot of joy in your degree program and in being a student for so long, and that was like
This
your
big
reason for
moment.
pursuing it because it's
Yes.
something that you really, really, really loved.
Yeah, and a lot of gratitude to my mother-in-law who started like she started taking my little infant son for about 2 hours a day when he was 4 months old. And I
Mm.
tell you, nothing like motherhood has made me um so efficient in the use of my time sometimes. Some days now, it's maybe not so much, but at that time I was like, 2 hours, if 2 hours is all I get, then 2 hours is I'm gonna get
Yes.
everything I can done in 2 hours, you know?
There's this expression that it's like if you want something done, give it
Yeah.
to a busy person.
Yeah.
It's like, mm,
They'll
it's
find a
true.
way. Now it's like, okay, even 10 minutes, okay, I can get that done,
Hmm.
checklist done. Um, Yeah, she started taking him from 4 months old. And at first, I didn't like being separated from my babies when they were that small, but I was like, okay, 2 hours at a time. And I finished my dissertation that year. And anyways, finally finished it when he was 13 months old. And then it was the whole like this brings me to like the summer of 2019, because he was born in 2018. And so that summer here, now I have my degrees, I have a PhD, and I had no job, but I still had like really, they're still infants when they're one, right? Like he was still
Yeah.
under 18 months old. He's an infant. I was still breastfeeding, and I had a 3-year-old too. And it's like the exhaustion of it all just hit home.
Well, and you're like, here I am, a very, very highly educated milk machine
Yes. Yeah, super
who's not
unemployed.
sleeping.
Who's not sleeping. And I remember going for like a rather prestigious job with our Department of Education. And I don't even remember like what I said in that interview, because my thoughts were just like it was so much effort just to get to that interview without stains on my clothing, like to
Yeah.
look halfway presentable and not have like food thrown at me,
Mm.
or like breast milk vomited on me or something. I remember it being so difficult just to get there that then like, and I didn't get the job, and I shouldn't have been applying probably at that time, but that was even a little bit
So,
earlier.
you know what?
Things that we go through.
Mothers just deserve just all of the kudos, all of the credit, all of the things of like what we go through. And like, so many people do not get it. Like, they just cannot fathom, like, you become a new person when you do not sleep for like
Right.
6 months. Like, you are not you without
Yeah.
sleep. Like, you are not you when you are a mom of two babies. Because
Yeah.
my oldest two are 14 months apart.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
they are,
Yeah.
and it's like you become a shell of yourself who is literally living in survival mode, and you're like, but I have a brain, I can't find it, but it's there somewhere in the back of my closet and I
Yeah.
miss it, but it's just in storage somewhere while I
Yeah.
just care for the basic needs of these humans. And it's such a trip because there's so much love and there's so much beauty in that season. And yet
Yeah.
you're like, somehow I also lost myself and found
Yeah.
myself all at the same time.
Because yeah, you're
And
just like literally depleted.
yeah,
Like you just because of the sleep, but then the brain part. I remember one day being like, but I know why I have no brain. It's not just this, it's the sleep, it's the no sleep, but it's also that like all my omegas that go to my brain are being sucked out of my boobs to this baby. Like it's growing their brain. Like
yeah,
all the nutrition we need for our brain. It's just like leaving your body and going to literally grow their brain bigger and
yeah.
bigger.
Well, and one thing I find is that moms we never give ourselves enough credit for having like gone through that season. Like
Yeah.
we're constantly like looking back and going, oh, why didn't I accomplish more? Why was I not more put together during that time? Like why are there no pictures of me when my kids were
Right.
little? And it's like, we need to give
Yeah.
ourselves so much more grace.
Yeah.
so much more
Look at, I
grace
love how we just
for
both had that same word at the same moment there. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a shame because, and I know for some women it's even harder. For people that really go through like postpartum depression or have severe anxiety
yeah.
or all of those things, I know that it can be even harder. I had gone through a depression in my 20s, a clinical
Mm,
depression. And I remember, like, as I had my baby, they're like asking these questions, and they're like, well, just remember, like, you're at greater risk for going through a postpartum depression because you went through a depression. I'm like, that's not helpful right now. I mean, it's good. Knowledge is empowering, but it also, I feel like it needs to be like
accompanied
a
with
little more
help.
hand holding and help. Yeah,
Yeah, and like
exactly.
it doesn't really help to be like, okay, you here's all the things you need. Good luck getting them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I will say, like, you know, I feel like my mom's generation, our mom's generation,
Oh,
they
yes.
never, like, they just didn't even really talk about these things. They
Nope.
just really suffered in silence and they felt so alone. Like in
Yeah.
talking with my mom now, it's like, well, when I was up for hours and hours and hours in the middle of the night, there was someone somewhere that I could like, slip into their DMs or like send a text or if I'd have friends that live in another country that were already up and I could send them a text, like we could connect through our phones in some way and somebody would be responding relatively soon, right? But they didn't have any of that. And it was also just expected that the woman would just do all of it.
Yeah.
And the guy just, I mean, for the most part, right? There's the rare stories of people that did it differently, but the men generally just, they were like, well, I have to sleep good because I have to go to work all day. Not that they didn't have to be, moms didn't have to be up doing all the other things that they also did during
Yeah.
the day,
Well,
right?
and
Like,
going back to like your, indigenous studies, it's like it used to be
mhm,
community based. It used to be that women were surrounded by their grandmothers, mothers, and these tribes of
that's
like
right.
these communities that were thriving together and midwives like helping throughout like what's called the fourth trimester, which would be the months after the
That's
baby was
right.
born. And like it was
Yep.
this whole system of support. And then we had this whole generation and many, many generations. But I think about like the Great Depression and everyone going, like men going to work and this separation of people. And it's like, it wasn't meant to be that way.
Yeah. And,
And the
and
damage
such
it has,
defined gender roles.
yeah, and the damage it has done to like to women a lot, but also to men
Also
and
to
like
men. Yeah.
to babies and to the way that we bond with each other. It's really impactful. And I bet that you learned a lot about that in your studies. And just it's powerful to think about and to ponder on how we can reignite the communities that we so desperately need.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially just, you mentioned like from my studies, like it almost more from the relationships I made through doing that work, like some of the
Mm.
elders that I work with that they really even though
Oh, that's
they're
beautiful.
educators first, like one of the elders I work with, she goes by a Blossomois, which is her Wolastoqey name, Moon of the Whirling Wind. And it's fitting because she's so busy. Her English name is Dr. Imelda Purley, and I guess I'm giving a shout out if she ever listens to this because she's been so influential, but she also did a ton of work in maternal child health and
Um,
all those things. And it's like it really, within a lot of their communities, the women, I mean, there's also intergenerational trauma and all of that,
yeah.
but it's definitely not just like it's these siloed families that are responsible for raising their children alone. Like if anything ever happens, there's like a network of people that will help with raising that child. Like the responsibility is more collective. Whereas like my husband and I, we moved to New Brunswick from Ontario in Canada 16 years ago, and we were living down here on our own. And my mother-in-law actually moved down here for 3 years she came when my son was like 4 weeks
Wow.
old and lived like 2 blocks away from us for 3 years. And she's moved back and we miss her. But I mean, that having that one person
Yeah.
Like we don't have a network. And my mom, she came down for 6 weeks at the birth of both of my children and stayed with us because I
Yeah.
had two C-sections also, right? So,
Oh, and
um,
C-sections are, I had one and
yeah.
it was traumatizing all on its own. It's the
Yeah.
community is an aspect of our society that has been not made important in these last few generations, and it is a critical part that we have not been realizing how important it is for our like brain health.
Yeah. Which that kind of like dovetails perfect into like the, what I really wanted to talk about a bit
Well,
today
great. Let's
was
dive
like
in.
what happened for me, especially in terms of motherhood, but like motherhood combined with career and stuff when COVID hit,
Mm,
which like it just, so it was March 13th, 2020 when
yeah.
it really hit our city. It was probably very close to there for
Yep.
you.
Hmm.
Yeah. And, like my kids were both still in daycare. Like they weren't even in school yet. Um, my son had just turned 2 and my daughter was almost 4. She was still 3. Her birthday's in May and his is in February. So all of
Mm.
a sudden we have both of us were trying to I was teaching several courses at the time at the university. So I had work that it amounted to full-time hours, even though I guess it wasn't really like a regular full-time job yet. And then and my husband had his full-time work, and then we had 2 kids under 4 at home
And so you
full
went into
time.
COVID, and so you're doing the whole like, let's work from home and do course, like teach courses from home while
Mhm.
these toddlers are
Well,
r-
toddlers. Yeah, they're
yeah,
toddlers. Exactly.
running around, and we're trying to care for them, but also teach. Ah,
Yeah. And they don't like they were just at that age, like there was no like, okay, you can play
they're,
with
I
these
mean,
toys for
not at
half an
that
hour. Not at
age.
that age. Like they
No,
just
that is
needed
an age.
100% supervision.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, like we just didn't, you know how we just didn't know how long it was going to be. And
Yeah. A
and you
month.
think like,
It'll be
okay, we can
fine.
keep doing the grind, and we're doing the grind of like, okay, we try to get up before them, get in a bit of work, splitting the hours of the day. Like we would switch days of like who would have them in the morning and who would have them in the afternoon. The afternoon session was obviously longer than the morning. And then get like after their bedtimes, be trying to do more work till like midnight, and then getting up, before 6 to do it all over again. And me, like my Achilles heel my whole life is uh, and I'm changing this narrative. I'm changing this narrative now for
Yeah.
myself now, but because I finally realized that when my stress gets too much, I get sick.
Mm. Yeah,
And
which
so
that's a very, very like we all need to realize this because
it
cortisol
ha
is literally the thing that makes us sick. Like
yeah.
cortisol, like so stress hormones, that is cortisol. So we're
Yeah.
literally having this conversation with my kids yesterday, trying to teach this to my 9-year-old. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, we go into flight or freeze or fawn, and the opposite of that is like being at peace. So if you're feeling stressed out from the fight, flight, or freeze or fawn, then you've got cortisol running through your body, which is the stress hormone, and that causes inflammation, which causes disease.
Yeah.
So keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I've had asthma since I was 2 years old. Back then they would diagnose kids that young. Um So I think I had within the first like 2 weeks of that COVID pandemic, I ended up having a bacterial pneumonia
Oh
from just
man.
like opportunistic bacteria that are like on your skin or something.
Yeah.
And then I was like really sick. Like so then my poor husband, thank goodness my mother-in-law was here, and she stayed in our bubble, because then like I had worked myself so hard and was like just trying to do all the things with like, looking after them, but still trying to do the same amount of work that I was doing before my two
Yep.
kids under 4 were home full time. And it just didn't work. And my body
No.
said enough. And then I was like sick in bed for like 2 weeks or something like that. That was about the 11th pneumonia I've had in my life, of
Oh
about
my
14 of them.
goodness.
So but at the same time, it was a gift because it was such a wake up call to me. And it just, I mean, I got the rest, they got less rest. So I felt a little guilty, but I got the rest that I needed. And it was also this huge wake up call for me that was like, we have to reframe our expectations, right? I
Yep.
have to reframe now because first of all, maybe we'll never have this time again. So I'm going to look at it as a blessing that I get to spend more time with my kids.
Mm,
And everyone in the whole world right now is dealing with not being able to get as much work done as they usually do, or
yep.
in the same way. And the load is going to be what it's going to be. Like nobody's going to die. I wasn't doing any kind of job that someone was going to die if I didn't get it done. Right. So it was a big shift moment for me. And then, and like, so we carried on. I got better from the pneumonia. And even though I'd had that shift, I noticed that gradually each day I was getting more and more like snippy with them. I had less tolerance for the noise. I was just starting to yell more and like,
Yep.
and because I was starting to feel like I was living with the fire alarm going off all the time,
Mm.
you know?
Yo, I know.
And somehow it's like your body, I know, I can tell
Oh,
already
I
that
know. Oh, I know that feeling really, really, really well.
oh, and yeah, and even saying it, sometimes it feels silly, but it's like I wasn't aware of it consciously until my body was screaming with it. And like if you snuck up behind me, I would scream and fall to the ground because my startle reflex was just so high. And
Yep.
so I realized my anxiety was like getting really out of control. And I was basically like, I either need to go to the doctor and I need medication. And I don't fault anyone for ever doing that because I'm actually already on like I also get migraine headaches, which is also related to stress. And I take a daily medication to help prevent them or so that they'll respond to other medication.
I
And
do
it's like,
too.
you do too. Well, there
I'm
you
like,
go.
yeah, so good. Like
That's a small world thing.
getting the help that you need is like, let's
It's
do it
so,
because
so
it's better than
important.
having migraines all the time. Although actually my migraines are less pain and more like so dizzy that I can't
Uh,
function. So it's really
yeah.
weird.
Yeah, from the like aura symptoms and things.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah, I know all the neurological parts of it.
Right?
Um,
Migraines bite. Let's just go with that.
it can be so debilitating.
Yeah.
Thankfully, at that time, that wasn't one of my big problems, but it was also why I was kind of like, I don't know if I want another medication like on top
Right.
of this one. And I was also like, well, I've been thinking about starting to meditate for like a year already. Like I
Mm.
was reading books about meditation. I was having conversations with people about meditation, but I hadn't actually started.
I did that for so long. I was learning about meditation for about a year
Yeah.
before I finally was like, nope, I need to. And now I meditate twice a day, but like it
Yeah.
took me about a year before I finally
Okay.
did it regularly. I did this thing where I was like, I'm meditating while multitasking. I'm also like, and then I
Right?
was like, oh wait, you can't multitask
No.
meditation. Oh, wait a minute, you can't do that. I tried that
I
though. I
know.
tried that because
Well,
that
and
was my overproductive, like multitasking self.
yeah, I do remember a couple times trying to be like, I'm going to sit here with my legs crossed and my hands on my knees facing upward in a cup position and like saying Om or something. But I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't know about apps that have a million guided meditations in them at
Yeah.
that point. And all of a sudden, literally, like I'd had that thought, and about 24 hours later, a friend sent me this message through Facebook, good old Facebook, that was like, will you join my 30-day abundance meditation challenge? And it was one of the Deepak Chopra ones that goes around and goes
Nice.
around. And I was like, yes, this is what I just said yesterday I needed. So 100%. It felt like a synchronicity. And
Mhm.
within about 4 days of doing that one a day, and they were short ones, like, well, I mean, I guess for some people it might not be that short for just starting off, but it was like there was an intro talk and an outro talk. And so the whole main meditation part was maybe like 6 minutes long. Like it wasn't
Oh,
long.
yeah, it was really
But then
short.
you were learning a little bit about it, and there was some journaling with it too. I really like that challenge. But I remember all of a sudden, about 4 days in, going, this is going to change my life.
Oh,
And
I
I've,
love. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I absolutely adore um meditation, and I will tell you that I am such a man, I could not stop myself from multitasking. I had such a hard time with it that I finally found a hack. So for anybody who's like me and was like, I can't, I have to do something else at the same time. I can't just sit here. I bought those face masks, the like paper face masks that you stick on your face. And I was like, if I put this face mask on my face, I can't do anything else at the same time. But then
right.
I feel like I'm multitasking because I'm doing a face
Doing the
mask
face
and
mask
meditating. So
and doing
every
that.
single, I mean, I also do an afternoon meditation that I often fall asleep
Right.
and it gets
That's okay.
interrupted a lot with my kids. But my morning one, I'll put the dang face mask on and I'll sit there and do my morning meditation with the face mask. So I feel like I'm multitasking
Yeah.
and meditating and I can't do anything because I have a face mask.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for so many people, it's just like, it feels like, you mean I'm supposed to sit there and like do nothing? And it's like, I mean, the simplest ones to start off with, and then I'm certainly no like guru in in that
Well, and you're
space. Like I don't,
listening and you're like following along. Like
yeah,
the guided
like
ones work really well for me. Like you can do it silently if you want to, but I like the listening one.
yeah, yeah, the guided ones definitely help you get it, like to just get into it at the beginning, or even just like simple mindfulness ones where you just
Yeah.
like listen to the sounds, like what do hear out, like what are the sounds that are around you, and then hear in, like what's going on in your internal dialogue. See out, like what do you see? That's with your eyes still open, right? Usually, I
Yeah.
guess you do that see one maybe before the hear one, then you can close your eyes, but like, and then like seeing in, like what are you picturing about what you have to do in your day and those kind of things, and then the breathe and smelling, you can go through the senses, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean
and
there's
it's
so
not
many different
about
ways.
yeah, and it's not about turning off your thoughts. It's about
Being
guiding your thoughts and
aware.
choosing your thoughts. And then like, oh, what's gonna be for dinner tonight? What about all the things I have to do? Oh, wait, no, come back. Come back to the thing that I was
Yeah,
paying attention to.
yeah.
Come back
And
to
for
it.
me, like I found like all most of my life, most people would say I'm a very reactive, like kind of dramatic person. And I speak, people will say things like, oh, she won't be afraid to speak her mind, and like things
I'm
that
not
just
like that at
come out.
all. Not me.
I think we're kind of kindred spirits here.
Yes.
Um, yeah, but and so there's always like a million thoughts rushing through. And I think it's like that pretty much for everybody, but maybe for some people it's a little bit slower,
Well,
a little
one
bit.
thing I heard that was really helpful is that
Mhm.
just like you breathe subconsciously, like unconsciously, like your brain thinks thoughts. Your body breathes on its own. You don't make it happen. Your brain
Yes.
thinks thoughts. It's just what
Yes.
brains do. You can't turn it off. That's just what
Right.
brains do.
So it's like becoming aware of that and then recognizing I am not my mind.
Yeah.
I am not my thoughts. I'm the observer of my thoughts,
Yes.
right?
I'm a I'm a divine being that has thoughts and I
Yeah.
can sometimes control them a little.
Yeah, and gradually it gets better. And
Yeah.
certainly like for me, like with them coming back to the kids, really it's pretty much always a daily practice, although I will sometimes say on weekends, I don't always get those morning ones in. But like you, I try to have at
Same.
least 2 times a day, like morning in the morning before everyone's up. That's just for me. And in the evening. And it just has really made such a big difference in how I parent.
Oh,
And like for
same.
me myself, but because of that, it changes how I show up, right? And I'm also more able to be like, all right, well, he's being like my son who's 6, like I call him my tornado child. Like he's super busy and
He's 6.
he's a busy body. Like he's just always moving, he's always running, he's always getting into things. He sees things and he's just constantly grabbing, like, and he makes a big mess. And then,
because
He
he's a
still throws
6-year-old
tantrums,
boy.
and he's a 6-year-old boy,
He's
right?
very six, and that is what six looks like.
That's what
And
6 looks
sometimes we
like.
have to remember that is what a six is supposed to look like. And it's
Yeah.
easy to be like, oh, I don't want it. But that's like, nope, that's normal and healthy and beautiful. And it's
Yeah.
me who needs to change my perspective.
Right. Yes, which actually you just like something else that I was going to share is like before I started meditating, I remember being like each day, like, why can't they listen? Like, why can't you just do this? I told you not to do this. And this is when they were 2 and 3, almost 4, right? So
Yeah.
it one day it just dawned on me. I'm like, wait, they're toddlers. They're doing what toddlers are supposed to do. And
Yep.
that's not going to change tomorrow.
Nope.
That's not going to change the next day.
Nope.
So the only thing I have control over in this moment is myself. So
Yep.
I'm the one that has to change. And meditation was one of the tools for doing that for
Yeah. Well, and
sure.
my kids are a fair bit older than yours. Like my oldest is, is turning 14 and my youngest is
Yeah.
turning 10. And the one thing I've learned is like they're never gonna listen. They don't listen. They never listen to what you say. But they will copy
Mm,
exactly what you do.
what you do.
They
Yeah.
will do exactly what you do. So be
Yeah.
very
Mm,
aware of the
yeah.
example. And it's an amazing example that you are meditating and you are showing them what it looks like to calm your body and what it
Yeah.
looks like to regulate your emotions. That's a really important example.
Yeah. And then I think once I started to do that and I started to be less reactive, and I started to like show up for myself and for them in a way that where like I like to use the phrase like it gave me the ability to pause, notice, and choose how I was going to respond to them. And I mean, that sounds really simple. And some days it works great like that. And some days it still is like, okay, now my volcano's going because I've asked you 10 times to do this one thing and you're still not doing it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a daily work in progress, but that ability to like have the pause, notice, and choose like was so big. But then it also started spurring for me like, all right, what I recognized that I was still a little depleted. Like I was doing all the work and I was doing all the things for the family, but I wasn't doing the things like just for me, like
Mm,
other things other than this, like having a morning routine and doing the meditations. I wasn't doing stuff just for me.
that makes a big
And
difference.
it was a big difference. And lots of people I know, um, I know you've had so many amazing people on your show that are creative and like in so many different ways, right?
Well,
Um,
parenting forces you to be creative.
yeah, exactly. For sure. For sure. Um, for me, I also recognize that I really, if to give back to myself, I needed to focus more on my physical health too,
Mm,
my physical fitness again. Because yeah, during those years of like having like being pregnant and having babies and recovering from C-sections and then just looking at keeping a human alive, your own like it your own physical health kind of for me it took a back burner.
yeah.
um and so here like that summer we were at the cottage. My husband's family has a cottage on the Northumberland Strait in Nova Scotia, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And there's a bay, like you could see it's in a bay, so you can see the other side, right? And I would always had sat and looked and been like, I wonder what it would be to swim across that. And then that summer, like someone at the neighbor's cottage did it. Like he really did it. Now I knew somebody that put on a wetsuit and swam out there from 8 in the morning and swam across the bay and had someone pick him up on the other side, right? With a go around. Well,
Wow.
no, someone boated across to make sure he was safe too. And I was like, oh my gosh, you did it. And it just planted the seed. Like, when you suddenly, it's like you've had a little seed planted, but then someone's done it and now you see it as a real possibility.
Yeah, that's so important to have that in your life of like somebody showing you that that's possible. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I could do that
Yeah.
too. Oh
And
my
then,
gosh, I
and he
could do
told me it
that.
was 7 kilometers across. And at the time, I remember being like, okay, 7 kilometers. Like it doesn't sound that bad. And
Seven,
I'm like,
seven, seven. Okay.
right? I didn't really know I think he was waiting for me to have some kind of reaction, but it,
Well,
but
I'm in the
I but
US,
I
so
wasn't
so
really
I'm
like a swim.
like,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
it's
know.
miles. I know, divide by 1.6.
I know. I'm like, oh,
Um,
I'm not, no.
just under 5, I guess, miles. But it's swimming. But at the time
Yeah.
I was ignorant of this. I was just like, okay, it's doable. And then like the next day I was like, I think I'm going to train to do a triathlon. And about 2 days after, I was talking with a colleague and they said, oh, my husband is like in this Fredericton Triathlon Club. And I was like, what? There's a Fredericton Triathlon Club? Like that's my city.
Yay.
And I'm like, I'm gonna find this. And I found it online. I like became a member that day and I signed up for their swim club to start swimming. But I hadn't done lane swimming for like 20 years, Carolee. And I thought, but I was just like, I'm all in. I'm doing this. I'm gonna train, I'm gonna do this triathlon, and I'm gonna be able to swim that day. And I thought I'd do that all the next summer. And this was now September, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it. And then like that reality of the first day of getting in the pool. You know what was the hardest thing? This is a sad thing actually, but I'm going to share it
Okay.
because I think it's important for women. The hardest thing of going and getting that pool. For me, it wasn't even putting on a bathing suit and meeting people in a bathing suit for the first, like that I'd never met before. I know lots of people that would be hard for, right? It was the not wearing any makeup and meeting like 30 new people.
Oh, yeah. I could not do that. No, I'd be over there with my waterproof makeup on.
Right?
I don't do, I'm not, not that I don't
But
do swimming. I can swim, but like I hate getting wet because it ruins my hair and my makeup. I look like a
right? The
drowning like
hair,
rat without my.
the curls. Oh, and that was the other thing is I was like, how do I get all of this very thick, very coarse, long, curly hair into a swim cap?
Oh, swim
I
cap.
didn't even know how to do that. I didn't know how to, I had to ask people when I got there. I was like, how am I going to do this? And I felt like there was so many things that crept up at the last minute that I was nervous about, but then I just was like, I'm just going to do it. And I got in this pool and I hadn't swam lanes in like 20 years. And even 20 years ago, to be honest, I probably swam lanes about 5 times in my whole life. And I was like, but I'm going to do it. And it's like an hour and a half of swimming and they're like using tools like fins, which in layman's language you'd call flippers. They look like flippers, but they're really called fins and these pulls on your hands. And I didn't know what any of this stuff was. I was like, was I supposed to have this before I came? And then they're looking at me. Everyone was so gracious because they recognize that there are some people that are just brand new and are showing up. But they kind of expect that most people there have like maybe done a triathlon already before they join a club. Maybe, I don't know. But I kept going. I kept going. This was like a Sunday morning, 7 a.m. It was how I fit it into my life because I was like, I was too anxious with like all the parenting things to go at any other time of the day. But I was like, I can go on a Sunday morning at 7 in the morning when everyone else is like, get up at 5:30 to be at the pool, like, because you have to eat and
Yeah.
fuel before you can get there. And like this year I haven't been doing it because I had a bit of a shoulder injury in November when I started to go back. So even now it sounds like almost removed from me, but I just remember going, no, but I'm going to do this. I set this goal and I'm going to do it. And even one day when I was swimming and we had like we had to swim as a pack and people were like right on my tail, like right tail meaning feet
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
And I had like this huge panic attack in the water. I started swallowing water. I couldn't breathe. I like grabbed onto the side and I was so inside, every bit of my body was screaming like, get the heck out of this pool and never come back. And one coach came over and he just held my hand the whole time. And he was like, just breathe. Coach Mike on, he just grabbed my hand and he said, just breathe. You're okay. You're safe. And he just stayed there with me in that moment. And I stayed in the pool. And like I wrote about it later, being like, this was like one of the worst things that I'd experienced in months, probably not the worst things in my life, but like it was a really awful, visceral feeling. And I was like, man, and I felt like I was really failing that day. And I remember friends being like, well, you were failing. the rest of us were all just still sleeping. Like we weren't even trying. And then I was like, okay, there's something to be said. Like I felt like I had just one foot in that world. And then other
Yeah.
people in the club, they started saying, you know what? That panic attack in the water, it happens to everybody. Even happens to people when they're doing the Ironman. And I was like,
Mm,
what? Like it made me feel a little bit more in that world. And honestly, like, they say that the influence that you get from the people that you hang out with, like all of a sudden I was in this world with like, I felt like a very average mom just trying to get shape, but I just had set this lofty goal for myself. And all of a sudden I was like in the pool with people that were training to do Ironmans and had already done them before. And
mm.
it kind of changed everything for me. And
That
that summer
perspective. Yeah, that
yeah,
perspective. Like when you see
that
yourself.
perspective.
Yeah, you see yourself with giants and then you're like, "Oh no, me too?" Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh. Oh,
And
okay.
like in some way, like just, I guess what I want people to know too is that for me at the beginning, even though the swimming was early, but eventually I had to fit in like running and biking like during different times, and the mom guilt was settling in, like, ah,
Mm,
I should be doing something for them. And I had to like silence that voice and be like, stop, like I need to do this for me. And I noticed it was another thing that helped me show up better for them.
yeah.
And then when I actually did a race and my kids were like, my mom's doing a race, like by me being brave, it showed them what it was to be brave.
Children it
And
was possible.
it showed them something that was possible. And they thought it was really cool. So I know that that's not for everybody, but it's
Being
been,
brave
I don't
is.
know. Yeah, but
But
being
being
brave
brave
is.
is. Yeah, in
That part
whatever
is.
way
Yeah.
that looks for you, like
Yeah.
showing up in whatever way you need to show up right now, like that's always an option.
Yeah.
Maybe like I'm not gonna go swim in a triathlon. I'm just that's not my thing. But like
Yeah.
being brave and showing up,
Yeah.
like that is absolutely an example that we can be to everyone in our lives to help them know that it's possible. And I
Yeah.
love that. And I love what an influence that is on everyone around us, but especially on our kids. It's so amazing and so beautiful. It's that's
Yeah.
everything. It's so important.
Yeah. Like there was one day that like after the first year, and I just did a sprint triathlon, by the way, which is the shortest one you can do. It's really none of the part, like I did the whole thing in an hour and a half. Like it's really not that long. Um, and then I kind of just focused on running for a while. But in the fall, I like went out, I took a mountain bike out instead of my road bike. And I was like, I'm gonna go do the trails. And it was starting to get kind of chilly, but it was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And I'm like, I'm gonna get this bike in. And while I was out, the wind really picked up and
Mm,
the sun was getting lower and like it was getting closer to setting and it started to get cold and super windy. So what was supposed to take me about 1 hour, it took me an hour and a half. And like I
mm.
had just was like, I'm just gonna do it quickly. And I didn't bring water. I didn't bring any like anything for fuel, like for to fuel my body through this because I was like, I can do it in an hour. I'll just drink when I get back. And I wasn't being really smart about it. And I came back and I was just so frozen and exhausted and I was crying. Like my last stretch home was like up a hill and I was crying. My body was so mad at me. And my kids saw me and they're like, oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I was like, I'm sorry, mommy just did this bike ride and I should have brought water and I didn't think it through. And it was really windy and it was really hard. And I'm sorry I'm crying. And my son looked at me in kindergarten, right? It was the beginning of the fall this year, I guess. And he said, Mommy, you can do hard things.
Oh,
And he was learning that at school too, right? But it just like something resonated for him. And I was like, oh my gosh, words of wisdom from mouths of babes, right? Like, you're
yeah. And for him
right.
to see that example in you that like we can cry and we can be cold and we can be uncomfortable and miserable and we can be stronger on the other side because of it. We can do hard
Yeah,
things.
not make those same kind of like a few bad decisions that went in there because I kind of jumped at it out of like an anxious place instead of a fully thoughtful place, but to go do that ride.
Yeah.
But those moments with
So
them have been like
beautiful.
really
Yeah, what a
important to
beautiful
me. Yeah.
example. Oh, this has been amazing. And your example with your kids is so beautiful. So, as we are wrapping up, do you have any place you want people to follow you or go find you?
Yeah, perfect. Well, yeah, right now, like you can find me on Instagram at Andrea Trenholm. It's kind of a personal account right now, but I have
Which is
some
great because I
work-related
bet
things there
everyone
too.
wants to go see all these pictures of you on your mountain bike and swimming. So,
I don't, there's probably not too many swimming. Thank goodness.
you're like, I'm
What was I
not
gonna say?
taking pictures.
I know. Well, my very first triathlon the only one that I've done so far, I went to the bathroom 15 minutes before I was supposed to get in the pool, and the zipper broke on my tri-suit. So
Oh
tri-suit
no.
is like a knee length, like one piece thing. It's like a tank
Yeah.
top to knees, and it just zips. And the
Yeah.
zipper broke. Like I
Oh
got
my
a
God.
secondhand one from a friend. And it was like, what am I gonna do? And nobody had like people don't have spare tri-suits, like they
Yeah.
just don't.
Yeah. I
So they
just
were
have one
trying
in
to,
my car. Let me just go grab it.
oh my God. So people were going through their bags of stuff. Like I was about to put on a pair of shorts, but they were a bit baggy. And my coach was like, no, you're gonna have too much drag in the pool. And he's like, put your bathing suit on top of your tri-suit. So that is
Ah,
how I did my first triathlon, was like I had no time to think about it. I just had to put the bathing suit on right over top. So there's a couple pictures of that look with the
that's
cap
hilarious and
and the
amazing.
bathing suit. Thankfully,
You
they
know
were
what?
both
And
kind of
like
navy.
show up messy. Like there is so much
Show up
like
messy. Yeah,
beautiful amazingness in showing up messy. Show up as you are, show up messy. And aren't you so glad that you followed through and did it, even though like you didn't just quit because your suit broke?
right. And
You kept
I
going.
probably looked a little ridiculous. And I do remember walking to the pool and people being like, "Oh, look what she's doing." And I was
You're like,
like,
I'm
"Yep,
rocking a
that's what
new
I'm doing. I'm just
style.
going. I
Like,
don't."
hello, this is the new fashion. How come you guys look weird?
But there is something to be said about when you don't give yourself time to have any second thoughts about it. It's just like,
Yes.
okay, done,
I'm here.
go.
I'm in this. There's no quitsies. This
There's
is
no
it.
quitsies.
I
This
had
is
this
it.
vision of doing this, and I'm here
Yeah.
for it, no matter what.
What wardrobe malfunctions happened? Thankfully, it wasn't like Janet Jackson.
No, I sewed myself a skirt in fifth grade for my first dance and by hand because I was afraid of the sewing machine. And the button, because I had put a button on it, of course, broke off halfway through the day.
Oh
And they were
no.
like, "You want to go home and change, right? We're gonna send you home to change." And I was like, "No, I am wearing this skirt to this dance. I don't care." And so we like safety pinned it back together. And then, of course, I spent the whole
Yeah.
dance like sitting off to the side because that was me in fifth grade. But it's like
Oh.
you show up and you do the thing you intended to do. No matter what happens, you just do it.
Yeah. And then and I'm on LinkedIn also,
Awesome.
and hopefully I will soon have other places to share with you, maybe
Yeah, because you're going to
retrospectively.
launch a podcast and tell us all about your amazing life.
Yeah.
You're
Well, and
excited for
have
that.
some of those guests that have achieved like that. Those are what I want to have some of my first guests, is because what I really learned out of all of it was that more than anything, I learned so much more about me,
Yeah.
like both mentally, but also my relationship with my body drastically changed. It really
Oh,
drastically
that's
changed.
beautiful. Oh,
And yeah.
this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I was really excited for this today.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Multi-Passionate Mama podcast. I know that we can never be told too many times how amazing we are, so in case you haven't been told today, you are a freaking rock star. When you let yourself shine, you allow other people to take off their filters and shine brightly too. It's about time someone gave you permission to be all of you. If you enjoyed this show, please leave me a review and hit that subscribe button. I know you want more of this. Sharing is caring. Let someone you love know how incredible they are by texting them the link to this episode. They will feel so good just knowing that you thought about them. Lastly, if you want to know more about my courses and coaching, be sure to check out my website for up-to-date details on everything I have available. It's caroleegarrison.com and the link is in the show notes. Always remember that you are a diamond. Don't let anyone dim your sparkle.